Good evening, Council. I've been told that Jerry Heron won't be joining us for the Committee of Adjustment, so we will call the meeting to order for the Committee of Adjustment for Tuesday, May the 25th, 2021. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of the committee, please be advised that meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Seeing none, can it please be noted, Madam Clerk? We are going to go to the minor variance applications. First of all, we will appoint Robert Lamar as Secretary Treasurer, that in accordance with Section 44(8) of the Planning Act, the committee hereby appoints Robert Lamar as the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment. Can I have a mover for that, please? Anita, seconded by Donna. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So, Rob, we will go to you and you can introduce the purpose of the meeting, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Committee of Adjustments holding a public hearing in accordance with Section 45 of the Planning Act, and in order to consider applications for relief from Bylaw 2009-21, being the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the Township of Selwyn. Prescribed notices, the public mail were provided by prepaid first-class mail to all residents within the 60-meter radius of the subject properties. Ministries and agencies were circulated via email. The subject properties were posted with a sign advertising the public hearing, and the notices were also available on the Township's website. And the notice circulation complies with the requirements of the Planning Act. And in order to be notified of the decision of the Township of Selwyn Committee on the variance applications, a written request must be made to the Township. So if I can just get into it, Madam Chair, there are 4 applications before the committee this evening. The General Note 3 of the applications, and we have evaluated them in accordance with the criteria for evaluating archaeological potential as provided for by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport. And each of the properties has been found to have potential for archaeological artifacts, and consequently we've added a condition to each of their approvals requiring and again, as a general note, I haven't received any input from any of the commenting agencies. So what I have done is I've incorporated the typical comments that we would receive from the agencies, Madam Chair. We have in 1 or 2 of the applications heard from neighboring landowners, and where we could, we've incorporated or provided the committee members with copies of their input. The first application, Madam Chair, is application A28-21. It's related to property at 1665 Kinsale Road in the Ennismore ward. The application is seeking relief from the Township's zoning bylaw to increase the maximum lot coverage from 5% to 9.1% for accessory structures, to reduce the side yard setback for boathouses from 10 meters to 1.2 meters, to decrease the minimum setback from high water mark from 30 meters to 27.6 meters to a dwelling addition, to decrease the minimum side yard setback on the northerly side of the property from 3 meters to 1.2 meters for that addition, and to increase the total lot coverage for all buildings from 20% to 21.1%. And the purpose of the request is to permit the construction of a 240 square foot 1-story addition to the dwelling, which will be slightly closer to the high water mark than the 30 meters that's required, and will be 1.2 meters from the side lot line. And is further requested, the variance would also allow for the construction of a 496 square foot boathouse. And that would require a side yard setback reduction and increase in the total and lot coverage required for buildings. So in my report, Madam Chair, I provided a summary of why I believe, for the most part, the application is minor, is consistent with what's occurring in the neighborhood. It meets the general intention of our official plan and our zoning bylaw, with one exception. That exception, Madam Chair, is related to the side yard setback for the boathouse. I put in my report that reduction to 1.2 meters from 10 meters, in my opinion, is not minor, particularly in light of the fact that there's an existing boat shed that is located 2.33 meters from the side yard setback, and the zoning bylaw would allow for the expansion of that structure without the need for a variance. And so what I'm suggesting that the committee for to grant the entirety of the application, save and except for the reduction in the side yard setback to 1.2 meters related to the boathouse, and that the boathouse could therefore then be constructed at a distance of 2.33 meters.
All right. So I understand that the agent, J. Lori Young, is on the line, and the owners, Bill and Donna Bomer. Ms. Young, is there anything you would like to add to the comments that Rob has made?
Yes, I just would like to say that in our looking at putting the boathouse, the 1.2 meters at the side yard line was in keeping with a nice big cedar hedge there. And my thoughts were, as well as the owners, is if that is tucked up nice and tight, people have a tendency not to store junk between their side lot line and the boathouse. So we thought that actually was a better plan than staying with the existing 2.3 meters that the boat shed presently is.
All right. And is there anything else?
No, I'm fine with everything else that's being accepted in the report.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Clerk, is there anyone that has registered to speak against this application?
No, Madam Chair, we have no one else here for this application other than the property owners.
All right, thank you. I'll bring it to committee. Are there any questions? Anita.
This is just a question with regards to, I guess it would be procedure. So that that point number 2 with regards to the where you put it in be denied. I'm trying to recall if there's been other applications where it's actually been broke out, where the ones that are suggested for approval, and then as a separate part of a recommendation, so for instance, that portion where it says be denied, in the past, haven't we sort of broke it out a little bit differently?
Rob?
Yeah, it could be. I think what'll be important, I think this I think conveys fairly accurately what the intent is. The decision itself, we could structure in a way that could break it out a bit differently, but the decision as I've drafted it, again, makes it very specific that that the majority of the decision of the committee is to approve, and that there's one proviso, and that relates to the 1.2 meters. So I think it's just the requirement is that it be clear, right, to the reader, exactly what the decision, the committee's decision has been.
All right, Donna.
I just wanted to say that I agree that the 1.2 meters be denied. Everything else is fine.
All right. No other questions. We'll move on, Rob, to A3121, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This application relates to a property located at 197 Arnott Drive in Ennismore Ward. The applicant is seeking relief from setback from high water mark from 30 meters to 20.1 meters in order to construct a 896 square foot, one-story garage addition to an existing dwelling. But again, as is our custom, we provided a summary of why it is, I believe, in this context, that the proposal meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and that meets general intent and purpose of the township's official plan and zoning bylaw. That it's appropriate in terms of the form of development in the area, and that the variance itself is minor in nature. And I have concluded that it's my opinion that the committee should consider it appropriate to grant the variance for the reasons spoken to in the report. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
All right, thank you. And I understand the owner, Dave and Karen Thompson, are on the line. Is there anything that either of you would like to add to what Mr. Lamar has said?
Yes, we are. In regards to the archaeological dig, there has been some previous excavations on our site. The basement was dug out of the existing home in the 90s, we believe, and some of that fill has probably ended up in this area that the proposed garage is going to go. We also added some when we expanded our parking pad to that same area. So I'm just questioning the necessity for the full report.
Rob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so the process that we follow is pretty, it's just it's pretty empirical, right? So the province has created a document that they call the criteria for evaluating archaeological potential, and it's just a matter of going through that as a staff person and determining whether or not the project or the proposal triggers the need for a review, right? So there's I guess there's some flexibility. It's pretty limited. So in order to be kind of taken off the list, we'd have to establish that there's been a recent disturbance over all or most of the area, right? So, and then they go about describing that in the checklist. So recent is after 1960, which I suspect you would meet that criteria. But has there been a thorough and complete disturbance in the area that's going to be disturbed? And if it was if it was smaller and was within, say, the general excavation of the former dwelling, you could say that. I just couldn't come to that conclusion, right? It could be that an archaeologist might look at it more closely and say, you know what, given what's going on here, maybe there's a driveway or some other things that have gone on. In their opinion, they may be able to come to a different conclusion, right? But I couldn't conclude that you weren't, I guess, right? That's where we're headed, right? So the checklist is, if these things occur, if you're within 300 meters of a water body, that's an automatic yes. And then if it's to be a no, then you have to meet a very specific set of criteria. So that's how we kind of evaluate that particular condition.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thompson?
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you. That was all I was wondering about.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Clerk, was there anyone that had registered to speak against this application?
There's no one else here for this application, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll bring it to committee. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to A3221, please.
Madam Chair, this application relates to 6635 route number 1. It's been provided by Jeff Kemp, and again, the agent in this context is J. Laurie Young as well. The applicant is seeking relief from the township's zoning bylaw as follows. They're looking to decrease the minimum setback from high water mark from 30 meters to 15 meters to permit the construction of a septic system, and to 27.76 meters to an open deck. And to decrease the minimum required setback from the side yard from 3 meters to 2.9 meters, one side to permit the construction of a 3-season room, and on the other side to 1.9 meters to permit the construction of a workshop. The structures themselves, I can summarize as being a 2-story addition. There's a 2-story addition proposed for the property, which will be 2,824 square feet, and a 1-story addition, which will be 532 square feet. A 3-season room will be 159 square feet, and the open deck is measured as 697 square feet. Of course, that's all depicted on the site plan, for the committee, and certainly that was provided to neighboring landowners. Again, as is our custom, I did review the submission for consistency with the 4 tests of the Planning Act that we must have regard for, and establish that the general intent and purpose of the township's official plan and zoning bylaw were being maintained, that the proposed development was appropriate for the area, and that the variances were minor in nature. We did include some input that we'd received from the Bucknor family, and that was actually embedded in my report. In addition to that, more recently, we did receive an email from Ken Johnston, and it was just, they had some concern with the way that the vehicles are being stored on the property, and I think there's some understanding that the first 4 of the larger 2-story construction project will be a garage, and so that's going to provide for a lot of opportunity to store some being stored outside today, indoors. So it was more of a comment than a concern, I think, Madam Chair. And I believe that was it in terms of any input from neighboring landowners.
I see that J. Laurie Young is here, as well as the owner, Sherry Laux. Laurie, do you have anything to add? You're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, through the chair, I just want to say that Mr. Kemp actually had a garage burned down at Christmas, and so in this addition, instead of rebuilding the standalone garage, we have slightly enlarged the attached garage, which should help take care of the vehicle storage that probably is in question regarding the neighbor. And as well, we've worked closely with the planner and been quite happy in presenting these variances. Thank you.
Thank you. And does the owner have anything that you wish to add?
I don't think so. I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. There is a question from Rachel Neal. Is she on the line?
Yes. Hello?
Yes.
Yes. It wasn't a question. We had sent in just concerns with only one part of the request, and it's regarding having a 2-story addition in the location that it's being proposed. In regards to, it will completely block out our view of the lake. And that is, to us, a concern not only for the loss of view, but also the loss of property value by no longer having a lake view home.
So, am I speaking to Rachel Neal?
Yes.
Okay. That is something that we cannot take into consideration when we're making our decision. And that is something that is not part of the consideration. But I appreciate that you have come forward and been a part of the process. Is there anyone else speak against this application, Deputy Clerk?
No one else here for this application, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll bring it to committee. Any questions? Donna?
Yes, so looking at the public comments from R. John Collins, 665 Far Route 1. And he was concerned about damage to a 45-year-old hedge. And I'm always trying to save hedges and trees and these different developments. So I was wondering if council would consider asking for an arborist report on how to protect this hedge during the construction, to make that one of the conditions.
Rob, what would you like to say to that? Anything?
Well, I think I would just want to point out that the concern is with the location of a pool. That isn't the subject of the variance. Now there is a reduction in the side yard proposed for a workshop on that side, but it's certainly within the committee's purview to do that. I just point out that, you know, his concern is specific to the construction of a pool, which is being located in accordance with the zoning bylaw in terms of setback from the lot lines.
It seemed to me that the pool concern was that he had 2 windows and a door on that side, so he'd be looking at them in the pool. The damage to the hedge is another issue, and if the committee would be in agreement, I would like an arborist report to protect the hedge if we could.
You're moving that motion?
I would like to move it, yes.
We have a seconder? Anita? All in favor? It's lost. Thank you. Anything else, Donna?
That's all. Thanks.
Andy, you had your hand up.
For you to Rob, I'm just having a bit of a challenge understanding the setbacks here. So what is the current encroachment within the 30 meters that exists?
So currently the structure itself is not encroaching. And so what will encroach ultimately is an open deck. And they're requesting that be allowed to be constructed as close as 27.76 meters from the high water mark.
So isn't there a 30-meter exclusion zone?
Yeah, so we make a distinction between permanent and non-permanent structures. So if what was being proposed was a permanent structure that's closer to the high water mark than the closest point of the existing structure, then we wouldn't be at liberty to approve. But we have defined open decks to be non-permanent, so to allow for decks to encroach further into the high water mark.
Okay, so don't we normally refer to that as a non-structural deck?
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, we would typically define that as being non-structural. You know.
Okay,
and
so
that is what's being proposed. Is non-structurally permanent, I think, is the language. Yeah.
Okay, so that got me a little confused. So where the actual residence is back 30 meters.
Yeah, it's 32 meters ish, I would say.
Okay. And the septic system, you're putting in a new septic system, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
In the same location?
I think Lori could answer that, perhaps. Lori.
Yep. Yes, through the chair. It will be, the septic is located in that location right now. So when they propose a new system, it will have to be dug up and reinstalled in similar spot. It may sit back a little bit further, but until we have a design, we won't know.
And my last question, in terms of the pool, that's a new pool, right?
Yes, through the chair, it will be a new pool.
Okay, and so it meets the side yard setback. To Rob, because it's encroaching. Pools are allowed to encroach?
No, it's depicted as being 100 feet from the high water mark. So pools, to answer your question, pools would not be allowed to encroach.
Okay, so I'm having the Dickens. I'm getting way too old to be able to read these things. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, that's fair. Yeah,
So that little squiggle along that line says 100 feet.
it does. Yes.
Okay, so they're going right up to the limit then, right?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm sorry, my eyesight's gone.
Thank you. All right, and we'll go on to the next application, please, Rob, A3421.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this one may be a little bit familiar. So this is a property at 1665, the fifth line of Smith, and the application has been provided to us by William Leahy. Leahy is looking to the committee to approve of a decrease in the minimum front yard setback from 15 meters to 13.1 meters to a dwelling, and to decrease the minimum rear yard setback from 10 meters to 5.7 meters to a dwelling, and 3.8 meters to a deck, and that's to permit the construction of a new dwelling, 1,660 square foot dwelling, and with an attached garage and a 316 square foot deck. This property and very similar variance was before the committee last year, and it was anticipated that the structure, or the way it was presented, was that the structure would be located the far west end at the top of the hill. And when the construction began, it was established that that would just be too costly. So the applicant decided to relocate it to the bottom of the hill. And so by virtue of the language that we have embedded in our decisions, it was felt that the change was too drastic to consider it to be not. So the language that we have in our decisions essentially says that the development will be substantially in accordance with the sketch submitted with the application. And of course, that is what neighbors rely on when we make our decision. In this context, it was too drastic a change to consider it not to be, or to be substantially in accordance with, and so consequently we had the applicant make an adjustment, an application to adjust the Committee of Adjustments decision. So I've heard, I did get a phone call from the neighbor saying that they were happy with what's transpiring. They didn't have any issue with it, and I don't believe we've received any negative input, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. On my agenda, it shows the 0, the fifth line. The actual report shows the proper address, 1655.
1665 is the correct address. Yes.
All right. Is there anyone, Deputy Clerk, here in favor of the application?
Madam Chair, there's no one here in favor and opposition of this application.
Thank you very much. We'll bring it to committee. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to approve the consent applications before us. Andy and Anita, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. There are no deferred matters or correspondence. The minutes of the Committee of Adjustment meeting held April 27th, 2021. Moved by Donna, seconded by Anita, all in favor. Carried, thank you. And our next meeting is June the 22nd. I need a motion to adjourn, please. Anita and Andy, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Colleagues, we'll reassemble just at 6, about 15 minutes, and we'll start our regular council meeting. Michelle, how are we doing? Are we ready with our YouTube?
Sorry, Council. Yeah, we're ready to go.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of council for May 25th, 2021. And I would ask that we please observe a moment of silence so that council staff and members of the public can quietly reflect on our duty to the community that we are trying to serve. Thank you, colleagues. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council, please be advised that meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Madam Clerk, note that there were none. We have two sets of minutes, May 13th for our special council meeting regarding cannabis, and also May 13th, our special meeting regarding the OP update. Sherry, I'd like to move both sets, and seconded by Donna. Just before I...
Mr. Chair, sorry, there were actually three sets. There's the regular meeting of May 11th as
yes,
well.
Yes, great. And so, Sherry, you're moving all three, right? Yeah. And Donna, you're moving all three. Thank you. Thank you, Angela. Just before we vote on that, the timeline regarding the draft bylaw that's coming out of the cannabis meeting, could anybody help me with when we would expect to see that back before us?
I can speak to that. I know that they're working at it as we speak. They're putting, I think, the final touches on the draft that staff will look at. I would suspect before the end of the week, Mr. Chair. And then I guess we'll put together a report and have and allow council to look at it as well at the next available meeting. I'm not sure what that date would be, to be honest with you, but it's probably going to be maybe the second meeting in June.
Okay.
I could see that being
Sooner rather than later is basically what you're saying.
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. All those in favor? Carry. Okay, we have a deputation tonight. Is Mr. Henchett on the line? There he is. The floor is yours. Good evening. And I know you've been here before, so we've got a 10-minute limit, and I will ask you to proceed when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm going to try to share my screen if that's possible. I'm going to share that, that part of my screen. There it is. And I'm going to make it bigger. If I can figure out how. There we go. And I'm going to click on the button somewhere that says present. Uh-oh, it's hidden by this. Present. Okay, so now we're both looking at the same thing. Thanks. I'm Guy Hanchett. Thanks for giving me the chance to come and talk about the future of Hague Point. I'm living in Selwyn Township in the Lakefield settlement area. And I am a member of Friends of Lakefield Park, but tonight I'm speaking for myself, but I'm confident that these views are completely aligned with members of Friends of Lakefield Park. So, and I'd like to also mention before I get started that on the last slide, I've included a link to the Lakefield Park website, which is where you can go to find out the details of everything that I will be referencing tonight. My first slide is a quick overview of the history of Hague Point. And many people aren't aware of how long it goes back, but it's been here for a long, long time. And it's before the canal raised the water levels, it used to be a rapids up at the very end of Hague Point, and native people from Curve Lake used to stop by there to camp on their way to go hunting. In 1832, it was purchased by settlers. In 1911, sold to Lakefield. And I've included a little snippet from the deed of sale, which has underlined in yellow the fact that it was sold to the town for park purposes. And I just wanted to emphasize that it's sold to the town for park purposes. Here's a lovely picture of some campers from Curve Lake. I recognize the family names of the people in there, Knott and Taylor, my good friend Dorothy Taylor. It's the same name as that. And Missy Knott, I've met her a few times. In the 1950s, campers and first trailers started showing up down in the park that was used, that's now called the Lakefield Campground. In 1976, there was some attempt to make some sewer hookups, and in 1995, it began being operated by a private company. And my next slide shows previous community consultations and decisions, and it goes back to 1991. And we have dug up something called the CAUSE study. The CAUSE study was put together in Lakefield at that time by a group of people who were the Ontario Association of Architects. There was broad community participation, including the Chamber of Commerce, and they concluded, among other things that were to do with the future of Lakefield itself, was that, quote, the waterfront and Lakefield Park should be maintained as public land. Campers should be removed. The trailer park is not appropriate use for this village land. In 1995, the Hague Point Advisory Committee came to a similar conclusion. It wasn't quite the same, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to track down any minutes of the meeting that was held in October of 1995. I've asked Angie to look for them in the historical records of the township at the town at the time, and she can't find them. But apparently what was chosen, and we did speak to people who were on that committee, we spoke to them and they said apparently the option was chosen to shrink the footprint of the campsite so that it would be moved away from the shoreline, to remove the decks that were becoming permanently attached to trailers, and to remove the docks that were there at that time. Most of those actions were taken in 1995 or shortly afterwards. In 2002, well, I don't know if it's Selwyn or anyway, the official town plan, Parks and Recreation Service Plan, in recommendation 49 said the campground use should be phased out and the area should be redeveloped as public parkland. In 2004, Orca commented on that and they added a reason which said new uses should be developed in consideration of environmental issues. So we have to ask in 2021, what has changed that would make us think that we would come to a different conclusion? And as far as I can tell, what has changed is a worldwide recognition that the value of nature to human well-being and environmental health. And as evidence of that, Canada has joined has made a commitment to have 30 by 30. Those numbers stand for 30% of the land of Canada will be reserved for nature by 2030. And right now, Canada is well under 30%. I'd like to point out that there's just inherent in the operation of private organizations managing public assets are that the profit motive conflicts with environmental and public interest. And here's some examples. It's just the definition. The profit motive of private organization is really at odds with public interest. Their motivation is to make as much profit as they can. You can see the results in the runaway prices on 407, and you can see the result of privatized long-term care homes during this pandemic. The tug of war and motivation has also shown itself here in the park. And you can see that in the fact that the private docks that shouldn't even be there according to township bylaws are there. Docking material that is incompatible with a provincially significant wetland is present. The concrete pier that they're attached to was built without permission sometime between 1995 and today. Decks that were removed in 1995 are now back. Trees that were about to be cut without permission in the last fall were only stopped because of citizen intervention. And you can see it in the expansion of sites and infrastructure. And I'd like to contrast that with what a responsible organization might do in a similar situation where they want to make a change. And I'll tell you the story about Imagine the Marsh. When we wanted to repair the stairs at Sadler Tower a few years ago, we made significant changes to what we wanted to do. We went through and found out what the regulations were at Orca. at MNR, at the township, at Parks Canada. We wanted to be good citizens and respect not only the rules and find how close we could get to the rules, but the intent of the rules. And I have to say that before we did anything, Rob Lamar drew up a design for us to repair the stairs. Thanks, Rob. I think I saw your name on here. It was a great design and it was very useful to us when we built the repair to the stairs. And I would like to contrast that responsible behavior to the behavior of the private sector, who's not necessarily the current operator, it's just any private operator is going to try to make as much profit out of the situation that he's got as he possibly can. Next, I'd like to point out the flawed process that we've used here to make this decision. And I'd like to ask if anybody remembers the Sesame Street song, "One of these things is not like the other." And on the right-hand side, you can see a picture of 3 things that are tools and 1 thing that's a shoe. And what we've got is a process that's asking us to choose which of those 4 things we want. And one of them is so different from the others, it's just incompatible. We should be asking, what do you want, a tool or a shoe? So the appropriate decision-making process in this case should have been, and still could be, to consult with what the community wants. Do we want a trailer park or a public park? And then after that, to determine the details of how to operate it. But what we've got is a whole bunch of questions that say, which model of trailer park do we want? How do we want to manage it? Or do you by chance want to have a public park? Second part of the flawed process is the flaws in the survey itself. The focus of the survey is on campground use. The first 11 questions only talk about campground use. How many times do you go camping? Do you like camping this way or that way? And doesn't talk about parkland use at all. The costs of upgrading the facilities were not shown to the survey participants. They were just, on the website, it said nothing about the costs. In the survey itself, it says nothing about the relative costs of the different options. So asking people what they prefer, whether they prefer to have a campground or a trailer park, without telling them how much each is going to cost, is really open to question as to how valid that kind of question could be. And the upgrade costs that have been produced are, I can just say, not reliable. You know, we've tried to pin it down. We've talked to the consultants. We've talked to people. It's hard to tell what it is, but the most recent documentation that we were able to see, the public was able to see, said it was upwards of $800,000 to do this. And we've already discussed the fact that
1 minute left.
Holy smokes, and I'm only halfway through, Andy.
Well, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll pick up the pace here. So the cost of upgrading facilities is not shown. I didn't know I was so slow. I'm going to move on. I'd like to point out these recent trailer park decisions. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them there. 6 of them decided that they wanted their trailer parks returned to public park. There's a lot of talk about a parkland having a surplus of parkland in Selwyn Township. It may be true, but if you consider only the Lakefield settlement area, we have a deficit of 2 hectares in this settlement area. And you can find details of that, again, at the references that are at the bottom of this and also on the website. And what do we want? We want to restart the public consultation by asking the public and Selwyn residents only to choose among competing land use options, including as public park. I would like us to honor the Selwyn Resolution 2018, which requires that reports for council are to include a section entitled Environmental Consideration. I'd like to make sure that the 4 pillars of sustainability, which were referenced by the consultants over and over again when we were talking to them, are social, human, environmental, and economic, and not just dollars. And what, of course, we really want is to close down or phase out the trailer park, but I don't want to short circuit what the public might come back and say. And we would like to begin after that deep public consultation using the model that was used in Perth to assign a citizen and community group. And we would like to implement that vision over time. Am I out of time now, Andy?
You're just closing in on 11 minutes. So
well, thanks for the extra minute. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you for your presentation. The actual, so that's your deck, and Township has a copy of that, right?
Yes, correct. I was making changes right up to about 5 to 6, and I sent the most recent copy to Angie a few minutes ago.
Okay, and I'm sure she'll circulate it to members of council. So thank you for your presentation. I'm now going to ask council members if they have any questions or observations they'd like to make. Yes, Donna.
Yes, through you. Is Mike Richardson here? No?
Unfortunately, Mike Richardson is not here at the moment.
Okay, I wonder, could somebody answer the question? Mr. Hatchett said that that there was a deficit of parkland in Lakefield, and I was of the understanding that there was not. If Lakefield South proceeds, then there will be parkland and trails included in that development. So I was wondering if somebody could confirm that statement on staff.
If you don't mind, Donna, I just ask you to take a look at, there's a page listed on the bottom of the presentation that I sent there, which shows the analysis and shows the sources that we've used to come up with the fact that if you look at Selwyn's, Selwyn Township as a whole, there is a surplus of parkland, but if you look at the Lakefield settlement area, there is not. There's a deficit. There's 2 hectares more required to meet the community standards.
Well, we'll ask Mike to come back. So.
And Andy, I can maybe speak to that just briefly.
Go ahead, Jenny.
So we did do some work in response to a question on that, and did provide some information. So I think referring to what's in the official plan and trying to break, we don't look at things on a per ward basis. We look across the municipality, and that's the way we typically report out on things. But based on the question that was asked, we did do some work to try and break that down. So certainly it speaks to community park standards and neighborhood park provisions. And when you get into the detail of the community parks, which would be the larger parks, not a neighborhood park, and not including the campground area, certainly the amount of parkland in the village ward does exceed the standard by about 0.4 hectares. When looking at neighborhood parks, and really we were just able to pull the acreage of a couple of the neighborhood parks, Senatess Park and Victoria Park. When you're looking specifically at neighborhood parks, it does show a deficit of 1.35 hectares, but we do know that that doesn't include many of the smaller parkettes that are throughout the village. It doesn't include the trail. It doesn't include any of the other public spaces. So that's how those numbers actually break down based on estimates of population. And certainly, as Councillor Valentine noted, when Lakefield South development moves forward, there is a large portion of community parkland and neighborhood parkland that would be included in that development, along with, I'm sure, trail development and that sort of thing. So for sure, that will add a lot of parkland to that area.
And Janice, when the consultant comes forward with additional information, that kind of analysis will be included, whether it comes from the staff or whether it comes from the consultant. It'll be included for council to look at, right?
We can provide some of that data for sure.
Thank you. Okay, other questions? Sherry, and then Jerry.
Thank you, through you. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Hatchett. Are you anticipating a good number of residents and visitors utilizing a park at Hague Point if that's the direction we go?
I'd just have to point back to the cause study that was done in 1991, which included representation from the Chamber of Commerce. And they concluded, I guess, that there would be similar traffic that would wind up purchasing goods and services in the village of Lakefield as it was known at that time.
That's not my question. I'm asking you if you feel that the park, if we go in that direction, it would be utilized by the residents and visitors.
I don't know. I'd love to answer a question, but when I don't know, I'd rather not. I don't know what traffic we can anticipate for that if it's turned into a park. But the features that we're...
the dilemma, because we're using a lot of what ifs, and it's difficult to anticipate certain aspects of the decision, which makes it that much harder for council. I just wanted to mention that if we did repurpose to a park, we might end up with unintended consequences where parking's not sufficient for what is there now, And we would end up creating parking problems, probably along Hague Boulevard, which wouldn't be appreciated by the people who live along there. I believe you live along there, correct?
That's correct. I'm probably far enough away that people wouldn't park down here, but
Oh, you never know. It depends on how many people end up at the park at the same time. But there's a considerable expense to adding to a parking lot. And you also have to look at the environmental aspects of that, because you yourself and your group have talked about how we have to be careful with the environment, and adding parking lots is not necessarily the way to go. So I'm just giving one example of what, some of the things that we have to consider when we go down the road as to what we're going to do.
thank you, Sherry. I through you, Mr. Mitchell, I certainly do understand those concerns. And we, I think until we decide what direction we want to move in, whether we want to have a public park or a trailer park, it's really hard to make that kind of detailed analysis.
Thank you. Jerry?
Thank you. Through you. How long have you lived in Lakefield, Mr. Hanchett?
I think it's 10 years now.
10 years you've been here? Okay. That's all I had. And just a comment though, but I do appreciate the Sesame Street reference. However, probably not the best call when staff put that together, and I find it a little insulting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Guy, I just want to ask you a question, and it's a little bit off topic, but you sort of brought it up. If I heard you correctly, and I may have misheard you, so please step in there. I think you said that private enterprise businesses is not capable of practicing sound environmental stewardship because their profit motive overwhelms their responsibility to exercise sound environmental stewardship. And I don't know, I may have read into it more than what you had meant to put there, but I just may be asking you to clarify that.
Certainly, I wouldn't say that they're incapable of doing that, but the profit motive is generally to extract as much profit out of an asset that you own as you can within the terms of the regulations that may limit you. And I didn't say that they couldn't do it. I just said that there's a constant tug of war between the profit motive and the public, what's in the public interest and what's in the environmental interest. And I pointed to the 4 pillars of environmental sustainability, and only one of them is economic.
But I think you would agree that there are a number of corporations out there that practice good environmental stewardship.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Anita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to play a little bit of devil's advocate. So when the village originally purchased the property, in the deed, it said that it was to be used for park purposes. So that could also extend to all of the residences, the houses that are along that strip. I know originally that was all leased land, 100-year leases. And then at a certain point, the village sold those properties so that rather than having cottage lots, they became residential year-round lots. So, and that's all on the same piece of property with regards to parkland. So how can you kind of weigh one against the other if the trailers have been there for, I don't know, 1940s or 1950s? How can you sort of justify one over the other? And should we just go in and then demolish all the houses that are along that strip?
You got me, Anita. I actually think that my personal house is not one of the ones that was a leased land. I think it was actually it was purchased before that. It was, but that's not really your question. Your question is, how can we justify having one set of rules for people who have houses along here, who have purchased property and who pay taxes, compared to the people who have a trailer in the trailer park? And I haven't got a good answer for that.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Just to provide a little clarity around that. So the village, when they purchased that property in 1911, noted in the recitals during the passage of the bylaw that it was being purchased for park purposes. So it wasn't, there is no restrictive covenant on it that requires it to be used only as parkland. I just want to make that very clear, that the whereas statement was used to show why the village was purchasing it. It does not mean that that is the only use that can take place. In fact, that is exactly why all of those leased lots were sold. They were done in accordance with the law of the day.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Guy. We appreciate you coming here and giving us the presentation. I suspect that we'll hear from you as we go through this process. And we appreciate you taking the time and your thoughtful presentation.
Thank you very much for the time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, colleagues, that is the only delegation we have tonight. So question period. Madam Clerk, do we have questions?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chair. We have 5 questions.
Okay, so why don't you pose them and I will try to answer them, or
Okay.
get staff to try to answer them.
Thank you. First question is from Peter Ward. My question is about the survey from the May 5th meeting. Why were the taxpayers in the village not polled separately? If they were, and you had the stats, I think you might find that 95% would want the campground to return back to passive parkland instead of the overcrowded and noisy eyesore that it is now.
Well, I'm going to answer that one. First of all, and I think I got to say this, that when we're surveying, it isn't just taxpayers' opinion that we're looking for. There's lots of folks that live in our township that aren't taxpayers. And so obviously taxpayers are a critical component, but there's lots of people in our community, and the idea of the survey is to reach out to as many folks as we can. But onto the specifics, the survey did have questions asking whether you were a permanent or seasonal resident, where you lived, including which area of the township. We also asked whether you owned a business and so on. All of these stats are going to be presented as part of the final report. So it will be possible to see the answers to the survey broken out into geographic components.
Okay, second question is from Karen D. This is with respect to the proposed cannabis cultivation on Cork Line. Why did Meridian Consulting recommend a 50-meter setback in the December 2019 report, and what facts did they use to establish this?
Well, at the time, the legalization of cannabis had only come into effect, I think, the year before. I think it was October of 2018, if my memory serves me correctly. Municipalities everywhere in Ontario were faced with creating regulations with little background in how these operations would function. We just really didn't have any experience on it. There were very few examples of best practices at the time. The bylaw that was created in 2020 was done so with the information that was available at that time and the recommendations that were available at that time.
Thank you. The third question is from Linda Gadd. She does have a bit of a preamble, but essentially her question is related to the docks along Hague Boulevard and a concern about the styrofoam pieces. Would council please tell us their plans for the removal / eliminations of the sources of microbead production and ultimately the removal of the styrofoam being used to float the docks at the Lakefield campground?
Mike, I see you're online, so can you take a stab at that?
Absolutely, through you, Mr. Mayor. Right now, as we know, Bill 228 has just been created, which is all about keeping, getting and keeping the styrofoam out of the water system. So we will be following that very closely and making sure that we adhere to everything, which at this point, it's about keeping the large chunks out. So screening is going to be recommended for next year, it looks like. if we're able to follow what they're initially saying. We did have the operator purchase some in order to wrap the last of the dock sections, even though they didn't have to, as an extra preventative measure. There was strapping, so 1x2 strapping in place to hold the main sections in ours at the in theirs at the campground, but they did add some screening over top of it so that even the smaller pieces, because most of what you saw in pictures were pieces as they were moving and as they were launching that first section. That's what you're seeing. So of course, we appreciate people picking those up and everybody weighing in to making sure we keep it out of the water. But we will continue to follow Bill 228 and stay ahead of it with any recommendations for complete elimination. Eventually, I think is where they're going. But for right now, it's about containing it and making sure you do everything you can to keep it out of the water, which will be in place for next year. But as I said, in the campground example, we actually went ahead and did the final sections, or the operator went ahead and did the final sections in some screening to make sure any pieces that could get knocked loose don't enter the water.
Thank you, Mike. Next question.
The next question is from Peter Ward again. Would you consider a referendum of the taxpayers to decide what to do with the land/park, referring to Hague Boulevard? Would these results be important to council?
Well, let me answer that one. First of all, the township is not considering a referendum. The decision is the responsibility of council, and I believe council is working very hard to gather perspectives and information from a wide range of people to do research so that it can make a fact-based decision about how to proceed. I should mention specifically to the concept of a referendum that under the Election Act, a referendum is noted as a question on the ballot. And generally these questions are asked as part of a municipal election. The next municipal election, as we're aware, is October the 22nd, 2022. And the township's decision is needed well in advance of that date. So it's really not something that's practical, but I just want to make it clear the township and the council are working hard to hear the perspectives of a wide range of people who have an interest in this particular issue. Next question.
The last question again is from Peter Ward. Why would you even listen to seasonal trailer site tenants who are not residents, taxpayers of the municipality and are surely biased?
Well, let me just try to be as clear as I can be in this answer. It's my intention, and I believe it is the intention of the rest of council and staff, to work hard to include people in our community discussion, not to exclude people based on any idea that one person's opinion may be more valuable than the next person's. I do not classify residents into different categories based on how much tax they pay, where they live, whether they come here year round or are here only part of the year, whether they're wealthy or not as wealthy, or whether they've been here for a few months or for generations. Everybody's opinion is important, and it is incumbent upon council to hear the broad range of perspectives. More specifically, I believe that council listening to the view of those who may occupy a trailer site is us listening to one of the perspectives. There are many out there. Sometimes they are at opposite ends of the spectrum, if I could put it that way. But our obligation is to listen to everyone who wants to provide us their opinion, to sort through that, to sort through the evidence that will be presented to us, and then to make a decision. So I got to say to folks, I value everybody's opinion. Any other questions?
No more questions.
Thank you, Angie. We'll move on to municipal officers and staff reports. The first one, Mike, you're up. Secret Garden.
Okay, good evening. I also want to make sure that I let you know that the individual who originally came forward with the idea to staff and then to the trail committee, Ian Delorier, along with, I'm just looking up the second name, sorry, along with Susan Newton, are also in attendance in case there's any specific questions that you might want. So they are on the Zoom meeting if there are any specific questions. And I want to thank them for their time and obviously for coming forward with the idea. As council will know, the barn in the Ennismore Waterfront Park has been on several agendas, and throughout the last 3 years, we've been trying to get it demolished and removed because it's no longer safe to use as a storage as it has been for years and years. So to that end, we thought we had a contract, and then after going out to an RFP, which wasn't successful, we thought we'd be able to get it done until COVID hit. So fortunately for Ian and the Ennismore Garden Club, who are also backing this project and would become the stewards in perpetuity of managing the gardens and whatnot, they came forward because of this delay. We're able to put together an idea and a project that would see the recycling and repurposing of the barn exactly the same as it had been in the presentation back in 2018. That wouldn't change at all. If the only thing would change is instead of these stone walls and the foundation being pushed in and then covered by topsoil and then seeded, the walls would stay up. They would get shored from the outside, and the earth and the base would become the shoring up of them on the inside. And frankly, it was the overstructure which was the problem. There's not the same structural requirements or issues when we get down just to the walls. So we wouldn't keep the doors on either end. That would be your entrance and exit, and it would become a garden that's 3 to 4 feet high and has beautiful stone walls on all 4 sides, and houses native materials and native plants, and just as it's a nice end loop to the walking trail. For several of the portions of the walking trail, you can come right through there and make it part of your walk. So the trail committee endorsed it, and you can see their recommendation to council. And now that we have somebody lined up to pay us to take down the recyclable materials and get it down to the stone wall over the summer, then we're ready to be able to take this to council and see if we can get the support of council.
Thank you. Questions? Donna?
Yes, thank you. Through you, maybe to Mike or maybe to Ian. I was speaking with one member of the garden club a few weeks ago, and they indicated that this could potentially be part, and I'm forgetting the numbers. Ennismore is having a special anniversary, I think in 2025. And I'm thinking it's the 200-year anniversary. I may have those figures wrong, but this person said that this could potentially be one recognition of that special anniversary. So I don't know if you know anything about that, Ian or Mike.
Mr. Chair, through you, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, through you, I'd like to, yes, confirm that there's I think it was at the county level, there was a 175th or 200th anniversary that's coming up in the next few years. And they suggested this might qualify for one of the projects at the local level. The other item they identified was that it was I think the 10th anniversary coming up next year of the Ennismore Garden Club. And they were looking around for some projects as well, and some support may be forthcoming that way as well. There is no financial commitment, however, at the present time from either of those two sources.
Thank you. Anybody else? Jerry, and then Anita.
Thank you, through you. This is a great idea. And it's just wonderful that this is going to happen where it is. I mean, they've found a way for the barn. Ian's done a great job sitting on both Park and Rec and, pardon me, the trails. These are two of the most engaged committees I think I've been on. These guys are out there working hard and coming up with great ideas, and just a great bunch. So congratulations, Ian, and congratulations to the Ennismore Garden Club. And I'll second that, because I'm assuming Donna would like to make the motion.
Sure, I would. Thank you.
Moved by Donna, seconded by Jerry, and Anita has comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to sort of piggyback on what Jerry said. I can almost envision what this little secret garden is going to look like, and I think it's going to be really beautiful, and I'm excited to see it proceed.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Mike. And we'll go on to the next report, which I believe is also yours, which is talking essentially our timeline on the review of the campground.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, huge thanks to Ange for pulling all this information together and making all the timelines and scheduling and meeting schedules work, and obviously getting a beautiful report pulled together for us to look at right now. Obviously there are a few choices on what the next steps will be, and it's certainly in council's hands now to decide how we want to step through this. There is a very definite set of meetings and timelines that we have promised we would come back to the public. We've had tremendous engagement, through the number of letters that we've gotten, through the number of surveys that we've gotten, through the number of emails. I believe the attachment has over 100 different inputs just from people's personal opportunities to say what they would like to see happen. So if council sees fit, we can move forward with these with the next steps, and since we do have a timeline of July, this would still allow us to meet that and see give members of the public a couple more opportunities to present any input, to make sure that they can ask questions, although briefly, because of the amount of time that each of them would be given. There still would be an opportunity for many delegations or individuals to create presentations, suggestions over the next couple opportunities. So.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I suspect some of my colleagues may have some comments, starting with Sherry.
Thank you, through you. First of all, I hope the report from the consultants will come in a little more timely fashion than the last one, which was just before the meeting. So if we can get as much advance notice with the report prior to the meeting, it would really be appreciated. I'm hoping that in the reports that the costs we're receiving would also include a cost to repurpose the park, or repurpose the property to a park, including staff costs, because as was mentioned during the deputation, we're being tasked with making a decision with sometimes not a lot of information, and it's making the task that much harder. With public engagement, will staff notify the groups of the ability to provide a deputation?
Angie?
Sorry, yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. We will make sure that we remind the Monteith Brown to get the information to us as soon as we can. I'm assuming since it's the 15th, you would like at least 4 or 5 days to look over that. So if we're looking at the 10th or the 11th to receive it, is that what you're hoping for?
That would be good.
And I think just to piggyback on that, it's not just us, but it's the public too. If we give the public this report 12 hours before we do our input sessions, will be significantly, and I think with some justification, criticized. They have to have a bit of time to read the report themselves and formulate some comments.
Yes, absolutely, through you. But I think in fairness to that first one, it was a lot of, we were really just out of the gate, and we were looking at making sure that the information, we could collect as much information as we possibly could. So we collected right till the 11th hour on that. So we will make sure now that we're well into the process that that we are more timely with everybody. We certainly know the major stakeholders, but as Mayor Mitchell said earlier, we don't want to just hear from one group. We want to hear from everybody. We want to engage everybody's opinions who are important. So if we're looking at the 10 stakeholders that were engaged initially, who obviously have been selected because of their direct involvement and their historic efforts to, or their efforts over time to be part of it, then the public would also have 5-minute slots, which is where council can determine how long they want to have that last at the end of it. So at least, if we do the hour, you're looking at 10 more public input sessions outside of the 10 stakeholder groups.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, so for the special meeting number 1, June 15th, we would propose that the first part of the meeting from 3:30 to 4:30 would be the presentation of the draft report. 4:30 to 5:30 would be the 10-minute delegation times for the stakeholder groups. That would give us an opportunity for 6 time slots for that, for those stakeholders that have previously been interviewed by Monteith Brown. Then we would have a short break, and then we are looking for council's direction with the last part of the meeting, which would start at 5:45. And this is where we will propose the 5-minute time slots for individual members of the public. So what we'd like to understand from council is how long you would like to do that for, so that as we're starting to make preparations, we know how much time we have and how many spots we have. So we're proposing you could do an hour and a half, 2 hours, more.
Just, if I could, on the first part of that, the 3:30 to 4:30 spot, where you've got the report presented and Q&A from councillors. If Monteith spends 45 minutes or 50 minutes making a presentation, and that leaves 10 minutes for council Q&As, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure, look, every one of our councillors are going to want to have a conversation about this. I think you can count on 15 minutes a councillor. Not all of the councillors may take all of that time, but I think you need to allow for that. And so if you allow the 5 of us each 15 minutes, that's an hour and 15 minutes. And if Monteith takes a half hour to present then I think you've got an hour and 3/4 just on that first meeting. I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I don't want to feel rushed. I want to know that I can have a conversation with the consultant and that my questions are going to be able to be put on the table. And I don't want it done at the expense of another one of my counselors who also, I'm sure, wants to do the same thing. So I just think, and I leave it to my counselors, that an hour to do both the presentation and Q&As from council isn't going to give us enough time.
Just based on the last presentation we had, it was about 20-25 minute presentation from Monteith. So we just looked at the timing similar to the last one that was held. So if you could give us an indication of how much time you want for counselors, then we would just structure it according to what we believe based on what Monteith tells us they need for presentation time.
Well, I would suggest that first unit be an hour and a half. And if we wrap it up in an hour and 15 minutes, then we'll take a 15-minute break because it's going to be a long evening. If we need the full hour and a half, we'll take the full hour and a half. And that, I think if Monteith does wrap it up in 20 or 25 minutes, that would be good. And particularly if they're providing it to us well in advance, then that would be a good idea. Anyways, that's my thought, that give us an hour and a half in that slot. If we use it, that's great. If we don't, then we'll just take a break going into the 4:30 slot. So I guess we can't go any earlier than 3:30. So we would need to go from 3:30 to 5 and then start the next section at 5. So the middle section, you've got 6 groups have been identified. Your intention, who've been previously interviewed, to give them each 10 minutes. Math is fairly straightforward on that. That's an hour. So the question that you're asking council, on just commenting on what I just said, is how many 5-minute delegations from the general public do you want to make room for? Colleagues. Gary.
All right, through you. So just back to that middle section for just a second. So you got 6 groups at 10 minutes plus questions. So you're probably an hour and a half for that as well, by the time the questions have been asked of the groups. As far as the how many slots, is all of council answering the questions, or will they be pre-screened and you'll be answering them, or will they be live without any previous knowledge?
The way other councils have operated on these types of things, Jerry, those are 5-minute interventions. There's no answering of the question. Somebody says, you've got 5 minutes, make your case. Thank you. Next person, you've got 5 minutes to make your case. Next person. So it's a different process. So it's just a 5 minutes. You get to say what you want to, and then the next 5-minute presenter goes. Yeah.
There's been some discussion with regards to whether or not the First Nations would be considered a stakeholder group, or if they've been questioned at all. So I'm just wondering, is the First Nations going to be included in that stakeholder groups, or have they been asked?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the Curve Lake First Nations have been asked since the start of this process through our CAO has been reaching out. The consultant has been reaching out. They were informed back when this all first began, and they were even part of a video that was put together by, I believe, the Friends of the Lakefield, Friends of Lakeville Park. But unfortunately, we haven't had any success in being able to get a time, or I don't believe to date, even Monteith Brown has. They continue to make it possible, and they will absolutely be invited as one of the potential 6 groups. And sorry about getting that backwards. I was thinking it was the 10 groups at 6 minutes each. So my mistake.
Anita?
Thank you. I just wanted to get that clarified, because there's been a lot of chatter that why haven't the First Nations been a part of this? But it sounds like from what you're saying, Mike, is that there has been a lot of outreach to the First Nations. So I think it's important that the people out there realize that the township has been working hard, and the consultant also to try to engage the First Nations.
Yeah, absolutely. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Locke. That is a very unfortunate misinformation that we've seen as well. But nothing could be further from the truth than the attempts to engage, and certainly, they're very, very busy at this time as well. So we understand. So that's why we asked Monteith Brown to reach out in a slightly less formal way if that was going to work better for them. Any way that they want to provide their input, we certainly absolutely welcome it.
Thank you. Sherry.
So the way we have it set up right now is 2.5 hours. So we're being asked how much longer we want to proceed with the 5-minute delegations. I would say another hour, and make sure, because like there's only so long you can go on Zoom before your brain starts to shut down. Maybe I'm different, I don't know, but I think that if we have no duplication, is it questions or deputations then, Mr. Mayor? Because I thought it was going to be questions.
No, it's my understanding, and Janice or Angie kick in here, that it's not been designed as question period. It's been designed as a supplemental opportunity for people to make an intervention and to say their piece and to have 5 minutes to do that. We get into it as a Q&A session. It's not practical in terms of time wise. So that's the thought behind it. So Janice and Angie, am I getting that right, or am I missed something?
That is correct. We would not actually have a question period as part of this meeting. It would just be a deputation.
Okay.
So I still feel the same way. I think another hour, that would make 3.5 hours on this particular issue, and I think that would be fair.
Okay. Donna?
Yes, thank you, through you. I agree that another hour is fair. We have been open to hearing all kinds of comments and suggestions for a month or two now, and I'm sure it will continue. And there's an opportunity for 2 more council meetings for delegations before that date, I think. Well, that's June the 15th. Well, there's 1 more council meeting at least. And they've had the surveys, and there's been a lot of conversation. So I agree that 1 more hour after the break of the first 2 sections would be fair to give to people for further comments and suggestions or whatever.
Jerry, and then Anita again.
Yeah, I like the 1 hour based on what everybody's saying.
Okay, Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also agree with the 1 hour, but I think we also have to continue to encourage people to send send comments in. I think what was that, 42 pages of comments that's attached to this report. So we know that there's a lot of public engagement, and I think that it's important that if anybody out there is listening, that we want to hear from you with your thoughts, and that also will be factoring into what council ultimately decides.
Okay, so let me just try to recap what I've heard. First thing is the report in advance, at least 4 days, and that's going to both council and to the public so they can formulate their opinion. 2, that first session of the presentation and council questions will be an 1.5 hour session. If we get done faster than that, then we will take a break. Second, that the formal stakeholder, the 6 formal stakeholders will each get 10 minutes. We have an hour there. Jerry suggested, wondering if we want to add that to 1 hour and 15 minutes to give a little bit of time for us to ask questions. Or we can just say, no, you do your 10 minutes and go from there. I don't know. Does somebody, yes, Jerry?
I think with the 10-minute deputation, there'd probably be questions asked. You've got a portion at the end with 5 minutes where they can just say, you know, here's why you should A or B. I think a deputation deserves a chance for us as council to ask questions for clarification. You know, and there may be some ideas there that, you know, you can build on.
Okay, so why don't we make that middle section an hour and 15 minutes? And then the final section, I believe it's the consensus of council that there'd be 1 hour of additional 5-minute presentation. So you're going to get at least 12 in, and maybe more depending if people don't take the whole period of time. Okay, so does Janice and Angie, does that give you an idea about how to do the meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just one clarification, and this is really just more for scheduling, makes it a little bit easier. But for the 10-minute delegation times, we'll do 10 minutes and then we'll do plus 5 minutes for questions. If it's less than that, that's fine, but it just makes it easier to schedule it that way.
Okay, I think that's fair enough.
And just one more thing.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Anne.
Janice.
I was just going to say, go ahead, Angie.
Sorry, did you want to build in an actual break in the event that there isn't a time to break between the first, between the presentation and the 10-minute deputations? Would you like at least a break schedule between the 10-minute deputations and the public engagements?
Yeah,
again, we're going to have to people are going to pre-register. We have to assign time. So just from an assignment and scheduling, it's just much easier to know exactly what you're looking for.
I would put 2 5-minute breaks in, one after the first section and then one after the second section. And if we're all roaring and ready to go, we could ignore it. But I would put the 5-minute break in there. I'm going to guess that I'll need it.
And I just wanted to clarify as well, the 5-minute 5-minute presentations, they would be scheduled as well. So if it's 5 minutes, we would be scheduling 12 presentations. It wouldn't, even if people are a little bit short, then we wouldn't be adding them on the day. They would have to be pre-registered as well.
Fair enough. Okay, so that takes care of that.
Mr. Mayor, my apologies for breaking in. I just want to follow up to the comment. Lucy, stop. Lucy, stop. Sorry with that. I just want to follow up on something here that Sherry had said earlier. She was concerned about 3.5 hours, but if we do this and take 2 minutes breaks, it's almost 4.5 hours. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. It goes an hour and a half on the first one, 3:30 to 5 to are we take, sorry, is it an hour and a half on the second one or an hour and 15 on the second one?
It'd end up being an hour and a half if you add 5 minutes on to each.
Okay.
So it's an hour and a half, and an hour. So it's a 4-hour. It's an hour and a half.
Yeah.
An hour and a half is 3 hours plus an hour. That's 4 hours of meetings.
Yeah. So 6:50 to 7:50. So we're done at 7:50. I just want to make sure that's 4.5 hours. As long as everybody understands that.
Well, it's 4 hours of meetings, and the rest of the time you're going to take some breaks. But yeah, it's a long meeting.
Okay.
We don't face this very often.
Right.
And so that's part of our challenge is because we're in COVID. If we were not in COVID, this would be a very different exercise. Everybody would gather at the same time in the same place, and we do it. We can't do it that way. We're constrained, and so we've got to live with the limitations. And living with those limitations means it takes us longer to get to the same place. So
yeah, I agree. I just was following up on her comment. So okay.
But Sherry's right. It's going to be a tough grind. After a couple hours, that's why I think taking a break is important. Donna?
Yes, for you. I just wanted to ask Anita a question because some days she does have off. Is there any way on the 15th, you could have maybe a shorter work day or something and we could start a little earlier, switch your schedule around?
I see that she's looking.
I could be home by 3 o'clock that day.
Okay, well, so.
Okay, so we can start at 3.
3 o'clock. Start at 3 o'clock.
That would help. We wouldn't maybe be as tired into the evening.
Okay, good for, works for me.
Does that work for everybody?
I'd suggest we provide refreshments, but that's not going to work either.
So Madam Clerk, can we change it to 3?
Yeah, we'll note that in the resolution.
Okay.
So I think the next part, of course, if we're satisfied with the format for special meeting 1, just moving on to special meeting 2, we have a suggested format noted there. We are proposing that date would actually be Monday, July the 19th at 3:30. Again, allowing for an hour for the presentation of the report and Q&A, followed by a break, followed by 10-minute deputations. And we're looking for council to give us an idea on how long you want those blocks of time to be, if you want them to be longer, and how many deputation times you're willing to entertain for that special meeting as well.
Okay, so let me just make sure I have it in my mind. At this point, what's been presented is a final report, right? This is the recommendation is there.
Correct.
And this is the meeting at which council is going to be asked to adopt the recommendation?
That's correct. That's the intention.
Okay, so let's just think about this for a second. If we get the presentation of the final draft, we ask questions. I guess what we're going to need to do then is have the deputations and then have the debate with council as to where we want to land. Right? So,
yes, your final decision would come after the deputations, yes.
So just going through the time here, if we go to the point that we made in the previous meeting, if councillors are going to get a chance to ask questions and get answers from the consultant, that 3:30 to 4:30 is probably 3:30 to 5 if you want to give everybody the opportunity to ask questions. Then we'll take a break. Then you want to do an hour's worth of patients. And when that's over, take another break, and then council would enter into debate and make its decision. So colleagues, I guess the decision is on that day, we'll have 1 hour worth of delegations. And I guess the question is, do you want 10-minute delegations with Q&As? Do you want 12 5-minute delegations? At that point, what is it that you want? Anita?
So I understand that all these deputations are on a first come, first served basis. But are we going to try to ensure that there's enough individuals making deputations that kind of look at all of the different options rather than sort of, maybe one group sort of having more slots, or how are we going to do that? Or will it be like a lottery? Because I think we'll be having, I think there will be quite a few people that will want to make deputations, whether it's for the first meeting or the second meeting. How are we going to ensure that there's a broad spectrum of opinions?
Janice, Angie, have you thought about that?
Well, typically it's first come, first serve. And so, yeah, I guess to answer the question, if you wanted to make sure that the stakeholders have an opportunity for deputations. You could have this deputation period be for stakeholders only.
So the same 6 that are in the slot in the June meeting would be the same 6 that are back for the.
Well,
for-
I would suggest you have 6 time slots if you're comfortable with the hour for stakeholders. And that way, for sure, whoever, whichever stakeholder groups come forward to request it, then at least you're going to get a perspective from each of the stakeholders should they wish to make a presentation.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not following you. Like my question was, is it the same set of stakeholders in July that made the presentation in June, or is it different?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, it would be the same stakeholders. I guess I was just trying to clarify that if there were 6 scheduled in June, you may not necessarily have that same 6 that would come forward to July, because there's more than 6 stakeholder groups.
So the question then back to Anita's is, if you have 14 requests and you do on a first come, first serve, you could have the people who are best off the mark to having a particular perspective. So the alternative that Anita is suggesting is you say, okay, anybody that wants to register has up until this date. If there's more than 6, we'll draw them by lot.
So I guess do we want the stakeholders, do we want to ensure that the stakeholders have an opportunity for a deputation at the July meeting?
I think we're already there. We've agreed that there's going to be that 1 hour of deputation.
Okay.
Okay, I don't think anybody's objecting to that. The issue at hand that Anita raised, and which I'm trying to raise, is how do you decide which are the 6?
Yes, and that would be on a first come, first serve basis.
And so council is suggesting that that's not the way we want to do it. Council is suggesting, or at least Anita is suggesting, council hasn't suggested anything yet, that the fairer way and a way of ensuring you get a better cross-section of people is to say, when you close off the application period, if you have more than 6, you draw the six people, the 6 will be drawn randomly as opposed to on a first come, first served basis. Anita, is that what I'm saying? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Donna?
Yes, through you. Another thought would be that the 6 that have the deputation on the whatever date it is in July, the 19th, if there are different stakeholder groups wanting a deputation on the 19th from the ones that were on June the 15th, give them the first opportunity. And then if there's time slots left, you could have a lottery for the remaining ones who have already given a deputation. That would be the most fair.
And Donna, if there's 8 brand new people and 6 spots, how do you whittle the 8 to 6?
Oh, I don't know. You're giving me a headache.
Sorry, just to be clear, I think we're confusing the stakeholders that are identified are not going to be over and above the stakeholders that were interviewed already by Monteith. So the stakeholders are the Friends of Lakefield Park, the Imagine the Marsh group, the campground stakeholders, the EDBC, the Parks and Recreation Committee, the Lakefield Trail Stewardship Committee. Sorry, I think that's why there's been a little bit of confusion. Those are the stakeholders.
Okay, so I'll ask the question again because you're confusing me. If you're saying those are the stakeholders, and those that you're saying the same people, the stakeholders who presented in June will also present in July.
sorry, yes, so the stakeholders that present in June, there are more than 6 stakeholder
There's only
groups.
6 that are presenting in, there is only 6 that are presenting in June.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, sorry. We have 6 time slots for the June meeting set aside for the stakeholders. So I'm sorry, I don't have the number in front of me. I believe there are 8 stakeholder groups. So that may mean of the 8, only 6 will have an opportunity for a delegation in June. So if you want to offer the stakeholders another opportunity for a deputation at the July meeting, it will be from that group of 8. So of that group of 8, there may be the same 6 that presented in June, or there could be 2 others that did not present in June that may wish to present in July. That's if you want the deputations to be confined to the stakeholders. That's not what was suggested, but to Anita's point, she was concerned that there could be an unbalanced perspective for delegations for anybody to come forward and make the request. So I just need to know from council, in terms of the delegations, do you want them to be a combination of stakeholders and the general public? Do you want it to be just open to anybody?
Donna?
Yes, if there are 8 stakeholder groups and only 6 can present in June, if the other 2 want to present in July, I think they should be given priority, and then other spaces could be filled up. Because if they're considered a stakeholder group, I think they should be given an opportunity to speak. I don't think it's fair to put 2 out of the picture if they're considered a stakeholder group, just because they didn't get in and before the other 6.
Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, I'm looking at the schedule for the June meeting where it says public engagement individuals, 5-minute time slots for individuals, and then there's 1 hour allows for 12 spots, 1.5 hours allows for 18 time slots. So how, let's say we went with the 1 hour of the public engagement 5-minute time slots that has 12 slots. What happens if we get, say, 20 people that want to make that 5-minute presentation or deputation, and we've only got the 12 slots? Let's say we had 20 people put their name forward. How can we ensure that there's a broad spectrum, or like I said, just a lottery would and take our chances?
Angie?
It's up to council. So we could do it first come, first serve, or we'll just collect them all, establish a date, and then pull names from a hat. And the 12 that are pulled from the hat are the ones that make the 5-minute delegations at the June 15th meeting.
Donna?
I'm happy to do that for the 12, but if somebody was identified as a specific stakeholder, if those 8 stakeholder groups want to speak, I think they should be given an opportunity between the 2 meetings. I'm fine with the lottery system for the others.
Jerry?
If I could suggest, if we take 6 at the June meeting, the other 2 that don't get to speak at the June meeting of the stakeholders, they automatically get a spot and then draw for the following 4 slots in the July meeting.
Yeah, I think that's what I was indicating. If they wanted to speak, they should be given the first opportunity.
Okay. So let me make sure that I got this. And I'll run through the two meetings together. So the first meeting's an hour and a half, council and the consultant. Then we have an hour of presentations, 10-minute delegations from stakeholders, of which there are 8, but only 6 obviously can be there. That could be the first 6 of the 8 stakeholders that apply. Okay. The third part of the meeting will be 12 5-minute slots. People apply for them. If there's more than 12, then there'll be a random draw. The next meeting, we have 6 10-minute slots for stakeholders. The 2 priorities go to the 2 stakeholders that didn't get to present in June. The other 4 stakeholders, 10-minute slots can go to anybody that applies for it. If there are more than 4, those 4 will be determined by a lottery. Is that what folks are saying? I see people nodding. Yes? Okay. Angie, does that make sense?
Yes, I understand that. Thank you.
Okay. So the only other thing that I wanted to bring up was, and I think this is already planned, but I think, and Anita talked to it, is that all of the correspondence that we receive be part of the package. I'm assuming it'll be an appendix on the report. The other thing that would be useful to be an appendix is all the Q&As that we've done. There's been a lot of question and answers and a lot of information conveyed back and forth. I think that should also be an appendix in the report so everybody can see everything that went on. And I also believe there's an analysis of the survey that will be part of the report as well. Correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else that anybody wants? And we're going to start the June meeting at 3. So everything moves up a half an hour. Okay. So do you want to read a resolution back to us, Angie, or why do you want to do this?
Okay, I think we've discussed the format of the meeting and have that noted. That will be included in the resolution. And we'll have the special meeting scheduled June 15th at 3 p.m. and the second special meeting July 19th at 3:30.
Okay. Does somebody want to move that? Anita? Seconded by Donna. All those in favor? Okay, that is carried. Okay, colleagues, we'll go to the consent items. I know there's stuff that will be pulled. Who wants to go ahead? Donna?
I think council has already received notification of this, but I have a motion to go with number 2 on the Cork Line resident concerns.
6A2, right? Anything else that people want to pull? Jerry?
6A1.
6A1. And I have a question. No, I don't. Anybody else have anything? Okay, let us go to 6A1 going in numerical order. Jerry.
Pardon me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This week I've got comments prepared as opposed to last time. My fellow members of council, you are tasked tonight with either receiving this letter or providing direction. I question what possible direction there could be, as this is a direct threat on my comments. Nothing more, nothing less. As far as I'm concerned, this is just another piece of correspondence, and I don't like wasting people's time, and I feel that I'm wasting council's time at this point, and I apologize to my fellow councillors for this. I'm frustrated, the ratepayers are frustrated, and I believe all of council is frustrated with the lack of progress that we've seen. We're all working hard for our residents. I believe that this is all I was doing as well that evening. Did I get heated? Slightly. Did I use language that is not parliamentary? Absolutely. Yes, I did. But as I stated earlier in that meeting, and funnily enough, it was left out of my comments, that this is the same dog and pony show that we have been getting for years, and all Parks Canada does is change the date on the top of the paperwork. The fact that we get the same regurgitated information shows just how pointless it is for people to have faith in the upper levels of government. So when I suggest that people do what they have to do, I think it needs to be looked at in that context. Whether it's reaching out to Mr. Wheatung or the new chief, whatever they can do on their own, they need to try. Neighbor to neighbor, not nation to nation. Neighbor to neighbor. It is proven that this approach with the nation to nation does not work with the federal government. I believe the history of this situation needs to be considered with my comments and not just that evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I'm just going to make a couple of comments and make a suggestion. So as Jerry said, the issue of Mahnomen wild rice has been a challenging one for some time. In going forward, I believe that there are three broad principles that we need to abide by. The first one is that the solution will be far more likely when the parties work together. The second is that there should be mutual respect between all the parties involved. And thirdly, that there needs to be a willingness to abide by the regulations that currently exist. Accordingly, if I could suggest to council, and I'll see if somebody's willing to move it and second it, that we may want to give direction something like this: that the correspondence from Heidi Burns with respect to comments made by Councillor Heron at the April 27, 2021 meeting be received for information, and that the township provide a response thereto, which includes a link to the discussion at this evening's meeting, so this discussion, and further that the township, while understanding the frustration with the length of time being taken to come to a satisfactory and balanced approach to wild rice harvesting in Pigeon Lake, reiterates the importance of everybody working together with mutual respect and consistent with current regulations. I don't know if somebody's willing to move that as our direction to staff. Councillor Heron, seconded by Anita. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we're off to your item now, Donna.
Thank you very much. This is in regards to the use of pesticides and herbicides on the potential grow site at 290 Cork Line. So I'll just read the motion into the public record. Whereas 290 Cork Line is in very close proximity to numerous residential areas, therefore be it resolved that the Township of Selwyn request that the MOE, oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Let me just go back here. I'm reading the wrong one. Apologize. I'm going to start again. That a letter be sent to the Ministry of the Environment, the Ministry of Conservation and Parks and Health Ministry of Conservation and Parks and Health Canada with the following motion. Whereas 290 Cork Line in Ennismore is in very close proximity to numerous residential areas, be it resolved that the Township of Selwyn requests that the MOE and the MECP do a physical site visit of this cannabis field grow operation, if approved by the Ministry of Health. It could potentially be too late if an inspection is only done after a complaint. Therefore, this would ensure that safe and appropriate practices are being followed regarding the storage and use of herbicides and pesticides on this sensitive site. And this is moved by myself, Councillor Ballantyne, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Senes.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, we're duly moved and seconded. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you, Donna. Thank you, Sherry. I believe those are the only two items that we pulled, so we need a motion to receive the rest of the items. Anita, seconded by Donna. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we are now into council portfolio reports. Donna?
Yes, the first item is the Link bus service. And I received an update that there's been a reduction in ridership since the last report, which I think was 30 some for the Curve Lake, Lakefield one, and 10 for the Bridge North Ennismore one. So there's been a reduction. Hopefully it's just a COVID related response. If not, if it continues to decline, we'll have to look for some other reason and some other ways to try and promote it. For the library board, tomorrow at 4 o'clock, there's going to be a check presentation from the Smith Ennismore Lions Club to the Selwyn Public Library for the sum of $3,000. And we will have somebody from the office take a photo which could be used in the council communicator. The Police Services Board, because of Black Cat stats and resident concerns, the OPP have set up radar several times on Fairburn over the past few weeks and have issued 41 tickets as of last week. And the rec committee met last week, and most of the meeting was just discussing the different options for the campground and getting their input. And that's all of my report.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Sherry.
Through you. I had reported a couple of months ago that Jesse's Tap and Grill had received CIP money, and they applied for an additional grant for landscaping improvement. They're putting patio stones around their deck and in the back. Double D's Donuts are located at the Spud and Bull on Lakefield Road. And Shimon Lodge, as I'm sure you've seen, has new ownership, AJ Brown and Adam Brown, who own Dr. J's Barbecue and Brews in Peterborough. I was there on Saturday and picked up some ribs and salad, and I can tell you that the food is delicious. So take advantage, go in and see them. All funds for our CIP 2021 have been spoken for. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Heron.
Thank you. Through you. Parks and Rec had a busy weekend implementing some of the changes that needed to be made on Friday night to get ready for the Burley Falls. The locks open this week, so they're still trying to figure out what's happening with the marinas. The roads guys are finishing up sweeping and getting ready for tar and chipping. That's it for me.
Thank you. Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have an Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow afternoon and a Heritage Committee on Thursday evening. So I have nothing to report there. June is Seniors Month. So they're looking for nominations for the 2021 Senior of the Year Award. But the deadline is like 6 days from now, May 31st. So if anybody out there knows of a worthy senior who should be nominated for the Senior of the Year Award, there is a website with regards to Seniors Month. I noticed that the new light standards are going up in downtown Lakefield and they look really nice. Census Canada, if you haven't done your census yet, please do so. And I was on Sustainable Peterborough website, and it's obviously turtle migrating season. So there's some really good tips on there for helping injured turtles and knowing how to get them from one side of the road to the other. That's it for me.
Thank you, Sherry, or Anita, sorry. From my end on the county side, just make note that we're really in the process of three very critical pieces of work that is really going to shape how we move forward as a region. One is our growth analysis, We talked a little bit about that at our special meeting. The other is a transportation master plan, and the other is our development charges study. All three of those are taking place at the same time. All of them have significant ramifications on the kind of growth and investments that will be made in our township. All three of these will feed into the official plan. MTO was at county council, talked about the construction season on 115. So there will be lane disruptions on 115 between the Highway 28 and Highway 7, I guess would be the best way to put it. So, and so for folks to be prepared for that. And we also agreed at county that we put forward 2 requests for delegation, one on broadband and one on public health. On public health, vaccinations are essentially open for everybody now, 12 and over. You can book appointments. They opened a block of appointments today. So they were booking appointments today. We're receiving a little more than 7,000 Pfizer each week, plus Moderna, and we're pushing that out the door as quickly as we can. As of Thursday, there was 69,989 doses administered, so essentially 70,000 doses. That's gone up since then. That's when they cut off their data. That represented at that time 52.3% of local residents had received a first dose. Rosanna in her press conference today indicated that was more like 55% now. And of that, we have a small number of about 4,882 have had second doses. The numbers in our area remain stubbornly high, although we did get a break over the weekend that we had a lower reporting. So hopefully we'll see the numbers go down. Although we did have 9 new cases today, close contacts are continuing to remain relatively high. So the province announced a reopening strategy, a 3-phase reopening strategy that is based on number of individuals who have been vaccinated on a province-wide basis. The question at hand is that's supposed to come into effect, the government's estimating on June the 14th. So when they say 60%, which is the trigger, it really has to come 2 weeks after the 60% number is achieved, because you need 2 weeks for the vaccine to take effect. So I think the province has gotten to 60%, but we haven't locally, and that's a question. How do you measure it? Is it the overall provincial number, or does every region have to be at 60%? I don't know the answer to that question. Then there are different. You're in each phase for a minimum of 21 days, or when you achieve your next tier of vaccination, whichever is the longer, I guess. So even if you achieve the vaccine target 3 days after you achieve the previous one, you still wait 21 days before you can switch over. The issue that the province has to address is if they remove the stay-at-home order and modify the emergency brake order, which is basically what replaced the color coding system, on June the 2nd, and you don't bring into place the phase 1 until June 14th, what happens between the 2nd and the 14th? So the government, they're well aware of that, but they have to speak to what that issue, how they're going to be able to deal with that. So that's basically what I have to report. Oh, I don't want to forget, June 1st, people in Lakefield, that we formally moved to Ontario Hydro. And so it'll be all front facing now, that it'll be Ontario Hydro. Okay, anything else? Not seeing any. Oh, yes. Let me just find my agenda. So we're going to go to, we're going to go into close, but we're going to complete everything. Sherry, go ahead.
Under other business.
Yeah, I'm just going to get there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, we're going to do other business, and I think we'll do the bylaws, and then we'll go to closed, we'll complete closed and then we won't have to come back here. Is that the way to do it, Angie?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. So unfinished business, or new or unfinished business, Sherry.
I just wanted to mention that we've got gypsy moths in Lakefield, in the lilacs, I know for sure, and I'm concerned that we might have them on a lot of the other trees in our park. So I don't know, Mike, if you've seen them, and is there a way to deal with them?
Sorry about that. Through you, Mr. Mayor. We haven't had any reporting of any gypsy moth issues or any cocoons through the parks, but I will have a conversation with Mark tomorrow and see and come back to you, to council, with an update probably by Thursday.
Thank you, Sherry. Under other business, I wanted to mention that I received an email from the MPP's office indicating that Dave is going to be partnering with Kawartha Food Share to do a food drive. And so there are 5 times that he's doing it, 3 of which are in Selwyn. So one is on Saturday, June the 5th at John's Value Mart in Bridgenorth. One is on June the 12th at Buckhorn Foodland. And one is in Lakefield at Giant Tiger on June the 26th. I'll send an email out to everybody. Dave invites councillors to participate with him. He also is holding a press conference to announce this on Thursday, the 27th at 11:30, which everybody's welcome to attend. Send out an email to that effect. I just want to okay. Any other new business? Do we need to some dates, Angie?
No, no dates.
Okay, so we're good?
Correct. Just.
So we need to go to the bylaws?
Correct. There are 2. There's the Heritage Registry policy and appointing a bylaw enforcement officer.
Okay, moved by Anita, seconded by Donna. All those in favor? Okay, we need a confirming bylaw. Donna and Anita. Okay, all those in favor? And I guess we should adjourn this meeting, correct?
Yes, sir. That'd be great.
Okay, Jerry moved it, seconded by Anita. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, staff. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Colleagues, it is 6:42, so by 6:45, if you could make a call into, or this shouldn't take us at 6:47. Okay, 5 minutes, 6:47. Okay.